Greetings and welcome to this guided meditation and Dharma talk. My name is Jonathan Foust, and thank you for making the time to be here. I hope you enjoy what comes next. I'd like to start off with a couple thank yous as I normally do. A big thank you to our mindful movement teacher for today. Also, a big thank you to Glenn Harrison and Leo Gimo for producing this evening. And as well, a big thank you to Ray Manioki and Tara Cassidy, who offer mindful dialogue after this session. The whole Monday night smorgasbord experience starts at 6:30. If you'd like to do about 50 minutes of mindful movement to help you kind of prepare for meditation, helps you release deep-seated tension and get a little more embodied. Then at 7:30, we move into this meditation and talk, and then afterward, a wonderful way to reflect on the talk, to connect with like-minded people, is to join the Mindful Dialogue group facilitated by Ray and Tara. It's a great way to connect with other people, to share about your experience. And if you'd like those Zoom links to mindful movement and mindful dialogue, you can check out my Facebook page or my website, and it'll bring you up to speed. Thank you to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for hosting this class, and as well to my good friends at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington, which has hosted Monday night meditation for many, many, many years, and will again, hopefully. We're looking at September when we'll maybe pick things up again. If you'd like to sign up on my mailing list through my website, there's a little update for this class weekly, and then there is a monthly newsletter with it's just support for your practice and photos and creative stuff like that. So please feel free. All my talks are available online. They're all offered freely, and this class as well is offered in the spirit of dana, or generosity, which is one of the foundational principles of this particular tradition. That is to say, the teachings, the experiences that lead to awakening are priceless, so therefore there's no charge. However, they're offered freely. I love this stuff, and your support, your generosity helps me to continue to do what I do and pay for the not inconsequential expenses that go into producing this stuff. So thank you for your support, and mostly just thank you for being here. It's such a pleasure to share these practices with so many people from around the planet. It's good to have you here. One final thing before we launch into meditation is a reminder that I'm leading a day-long retreat on January 9th. It's entitled The Most Important Thing, Beginning Your Year with Mindful Intention. I'm right now in the throes of doing my annual review where I look at what worked, what didn't work, and really trying to tune into what really enlivens me in the next year. If you're drawn to explore that for the day, a combination of both meditation, inward focus, and reflection, as well as being around like-minded people, please feel free to check that out. It's from 9:30 to 4 on January 9th. So with all that out of the way, we're going to dive into a meditation. The topic for tonight for the talk is a continuation of this exploration of the witness, this capacity to observe without judgment. But it's also an inquiry into what is it that's beyond the witness? It gets a little woo-woo, but it's pretty cool stuff. So we're going to work a little bit of that into this meditation. The first element of practice, of course, is gathering attention and relaxing into the here and now. This is an embodied practice. So why don't we just start off with a little bit of movement. And if you've done anything with me, you're probably familiar with what we're going to do. It's a very, very simple but effective technique for kind of aligning your body for meditation. So what you can do, hands in hitchhiker position, point the thumbs behind you, fists are right about at ear level, and begin to slow down and deepen your breath. If you like, you can close your eyes. Now there's no strain in this whatsoever, so you can just widen your elbows out to the side. And the focal point here is to draw your shoulder blades close together. Draw your shoulder blades down just a little bit. If you want to add a couple details, draw your navel in toward the spine. That's going to activate the core of the body. Now the next thing you can do is begin to slow down and deepen your breath. Long, slow, deep breath. Hold and sustain the contraction between the shoulder blades. And we're going to hold this for a minute or so. This is when you get this really cool reset. Long, slow, deep breath. Draw the breath up under the collarbone so you're inflating the upper lobes of the lungs, and then explore on the exhalation. Draw the navel in toward the spine so you're forcing all the stale air out of your lungs. Moving now into a little more of a full contraction. Feel the slack taken out of all the muscles along the back. Feel the opening in the chest. And the final breath, you might imagine you're breathing your heart forward. And then reach your arms up overhead. Stretch up through the left side, the right side. Alternate back and forth. Let out any sounds. You're on mute. No one can hear you. And then as you're ready, close the eyes, relax the fingers, relax your thumbs, and let there be a slow motion release of the hands. And this slow motion release of the hands can be an ultra slow motion or just regular slow motion. But let this be a way of beginning to gather your attention to the here and now. Relax. Feel all the details that are happening right now. And if you would, relax and soften your palms. Can you relax and soften the backs of your hands? And you might just sense what it's like to simply relax and be fully present. Nothing to do, nothing to fix, nowhere to go. But if you relax and widen your attention 360 degrees, just notice everything you're noticing. And you may notice that there are sensations happening, there are thoughts happening, there are different emotional or moods that are happening, there are different states that can happen, all without you doing a single thing, but simply being aware. And you might sense this as the backdrop of your practice as we explore some different techniques. And no matter what, in the background, awareness is always present. And you might now like to bring your awareness to your breath and just for a few minutes here, you can begin to slow down and deepen your breath. Breathing in slow to the count of 4 or 5 or maybe even 6. Gliding into the exhalation to the same length, 4 or 5 or 6. How intimately can you track the movement of sensation here? And you might continue with the slow, deep breath as a way of gathering your attention, or you might relax any control of the breath. And you might turn your attention to sensing on the inside, the forehead smooth, the face relaxing. And you might sense if you could relax the whole mechanism of the jaw and the lips, the inside of the mouth and the tongue. Feel the weight of the shoulders and the weight of your arms as you sense down through the elbows, down through the wrists. letting your awareness flood into the palms, fingers, and thumbs, backs of the hands. Relax and soften and feel. Sensing the lower back and the buttocks. And the belly and the lower abdomen. Again, softening the belly, sensing and feeling. Letting things be. And sensing now the floor, the pelvis, and the hip joints. And the volume and the length of your legs. Down through the knees. Down through the ankles. The tops of the feet and the toes. And sensing from the inside the soles of the feet and the heels. Noticing the sense of deep relaxation, and you might inquire, is there anything that could soften, anything that could relax right now on the inside? And noticing at the same time this quality of alertness, a quality of wakefulness. And here you might bring your attention to an anchor of your choosing. You might elect to focus your attention on your breathing, the sense of the breath on the inside, or maybe the sounds around you as they're happening. And some find relaxing and sensing the palms and fingers and thumbs to be a helpful anchor. Whatever you choose, breath or sound or the feeling in the hands, for this next period of time, let this be your primary point of attention. The mind will continue to generate thoughts. This is not about controlling the mind. It's about waking up when the mind is active and escorting your attention back to the experience of now, the experience of here. When you notice the mind lost in thought, you might just take a moment to pause and explore that moment of waking up, realizing that your attention is caught in a narrative or a thought form. That moment of waking up is a moment for celebration. And you might, as you have that sense of wakefulness, relax, arrive in the senses. And again, notice how intimately you can feel your anchor from the inside. One helpful element of this practice is using focus and concentration to gather your attention in the here and now. And you may notice that there can be this organic arising, this sense of who you are as the observer, and this seat of the witness. And here you might broaden and widen your attention, noticing what's changing and sensing your relationship to what's changing. If there's any attitude in the mind, if there's any sense of holding on or pushing away, any sense of confusion. And the practice essentially remains the same. When you notice the mind lost in thought, guide your attention back to the senses, relax, feel. Use your anchor to arrive. And then in your own way, widen, broaden your attention, and taking this seat of the witness. Noticing what's happening and noticing the attitude, noticing your relationship to what is happening. It might be helpful when you notice lost in thought to simply notice thinking. Or if there's strong sensation, to simply note internally feeling. You may find that this can be a helpful way of reinforcing the sense of your capacity to observe without judgment. What are you aware of right now? Can you let it be? In these remaining 5 minutes or so, you might refresh your practice, sensing first this ground of deep inner relaxation and softening, relaxing the jaw, lips, and tongue. You might soften the hands, palms, fingers, thumbs, and backs of the hands. You could do it anyway, soften through your lower back and buttocks and the belly, softening and sensing. And the soles of the feet and the heels. Deeply relaxed. At the same time, alert. And you might explore over the next 3 breaths, how intimately can you feel and experience your anchor on the inside? And then again, for the next 3 breaths, how intimately can you experience and feel on the inside? And can you sense this seat of the witness or the observer, that which is aware right now? You may find the more you relax and the more you widen your attention, the more you can sense this quality of spacious presence and allowing. And you might relax, let go of the anchor. Let go of any effort to be the observer. And sense what it means to rest in presence. What could relax or soften or let go right now? And what could soften or relax or let go right now? And as you sense this quality of spaciousness, you might simultaneously sense where you feel the breath the most predominant right now. And you might begin to slow down and deepen and lengthen your breath. And sense again this quality of deep relaxation and alertness. With your eyes closed, you might let your head drift a little bit to the left and the right, just sensing the movement from the inside. Feel free to stretch and move in any way that feels good for you. Take your time for your transition. You might like to reach your arms up overhead. Stretch up again through the left side, the right side. Let out any sounds. Welcome. There's a Harrison Ford movie called Witness. It's the story about this little Amish boy and his mom who are in a train station in Philadelphia, and they witness a murder. So Harrison Ford, for whatever reason, has to kind of disguise himself as an Amish, and he's with his kind of adopted family, dressed in Amish outfit, and going into town in the horse and buggy. And some of the local bullies are harassing his adopted family. I think they take a little ice cream cone, and he gets out to interact with them, and I think they dip his nose in the ice cream, knowing that as an Amish man, he's not going to hit back, but instead, Harrison Ford punches this guy in the face. I saw it in a movie theater, and I remember how everyone laughed and they applauded at that moment. So it's interesting how, with the movie The Witness, he suddenly was no longer the witness. He was no longer the objective observer. Aversion took over, and suddenly, losing the witness, he was caught in reactivity. You might be asking yourself, why is he talking about this right now? First of all, it's a great movie, but I want to talk a little more about this concept of the witness, how being the witness can really serve you in cultivating less reactivity. But more than that, how the witness can really be a way to experience reality and explore awareness itself. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the power of the witness for freedom and liberation. So I'd like to talk first about how the witness can free you from the tyranny of the mind. And second, how it can free you from the tyranny of constant, never-ending reactivity. But then I'd like to talk about what it means to become aware of the witness itself. And beyond that, what it means to be aware of awareness. Like, what is it that's beyond the witness? So I can go yada, yada, yada all day long on this stuff, but it's really through experiential practices that we can really get a taste of it. So this is going to be a pretty experiential talk. So awareness of the mind, freedom from tyranny of the mind. I was thinking about this. It reminded me of how I faked my way into a job with the Peace Corps many, many years ago. I just finished my master's degree, and I ended up getting a job as a lecturer in phonetics at the University of Niamey in Niger, West Africa. And how I basically faked my way into the job is they asked me if I could teach university level phonetics, and I said yes. I knew very little about phonetics. And what I didn't realize when I got there from my training in immersion in French and local languages was that I was going to be teaching graduate level phonetics. That my students were secondary teachers from all over the country. Many of them were 20, 30 years older than me. Most of them were fluent in at least 4 languages. I was 22 years old and I was still struggling with English, let alone struggling with French. And I had these nightmares of my first lecture, of standing in front of this group and saying, my name is. And what I noticed, of course, is how my mind was generating this narrative of horror. And that's what the mind does. It's designed to anticipate danger. And it's designed to anticipate possible rewards. If in an unexamined life, all we're doing is moving away from pain and moving toward perceived pleasure. When you begin to study the mind, you see that out of these 50,000 thoughts a day, very few are originals. You also begin to notice how there's a negativity bias that runs through almost everything. What could go wrong? What could threaten my well-being? The positive information tends to be a little more like Teflon. But the negative stuff, that's what really, really sticks. Someone was recently telling me how, with the holidays coming upon us and social isolation, of how he just keeps thinking about being alone. And he realized there's just this circular thinking coming back again and again and again to this whole story around being alone for the holidays. And he realized that this thought was just a habit. It's almost like going back to chew a comfortable bone. And maybe you've noticed this cyclical thinking, how the same stories tend to just keep coming by again and again and again. And this is what meditation or mindfulness reveals. It reveals your top 10 or your top 5, the habitual stories and thoughts that just keep replaying over and over and over again. part of this is this function of consciousness that's designed to keep this sense of who you are intact. So it's an ongoing narrative keeping the story together of who you are. It's not a bad thing because it keeps the sense of self intact. But it goes on all the time, reinforcing the sense of who you are as this separate being making your way through the world. The good news is that you can wake up to it, that you can be aware, more and more aware of your thought process. And this is the cool part. You can be aware of how that arises, like what underlies the narrative when you develop more and more of this sense of the witness, more and more of this sense of who you are as the observer of phenomena, as opposed to who you are reacting to phenomena. So we are reacting all the time. Good news, bad news, good news, bad news. And I remember actually just a few days ago, we had the snow coming into DC. It's like, oh, the snow's coming in. Oh, that's bad. But it'll be beautiful. I'll be able to get some cool photography. Oh, that's good. Yeah, but we might lose power. Oh, God, that's bad. Well, but we've got plenty of wood and a wood stove. Well, that's good. Oh, but I better bring in more wood before it snows because I need to do all this stuff. Oh, that's bad. But if I do get the wood in, that'll be good. Oh, yeah. So there we go. On and on and on. And you may notice when you begin to slow down and observe the mind that we're constantly filtering our experience. What's good? What's bad? So from where do thoughts arise? This could be a complete series of talks, but one thing to consider is that thoughts and beliefs and habits arise from the direct experience of here and now through your senses and through the body. That phrase, your issues are in your tissues, is really quite true. That you're a mind-body matrix. That every emotion you have is a corresponding felt sense of certain locale in the body. And the same with thoughts. And again, this is part of the gift and part of the challenge in becoming more aware is you begin to realize the intimate connection between body and mind. And so, of course, there's a beautiful teaching in these practices. It's around learning how to pay attention to the feeling tone of your body. It's referred to as Vedana. It's an entire practice unto itself, but it's also just something to really keep in mind. That when you have a thought that's tinged with that negativity bias, there will most probably be some kind of a clench, some kind of a tension, some felt sense of contraction. It might be very small, but nonetheless, it'll be there. Now, the question, of course, is what comes first, the thought or this felt sense in the body? And there's a fair bit of science that points toward what actually arises in the body first. At first you feel the clench or the contraction, and then the mind comes in, does an interpretation, and then makes up a story. Nonetheless, the practice here is to be aware of how your nervous system responds to three stimuli. They'll be pleasant, which tends to be expansive, has a quality of desire to it. There's aversion, which has a sense of contraction or pushing away or clenching. And then the third category is the in-between stuff. It's neither pleasant nor unpleasant. So it has a kind of a neutrality to it. And with that, of course, you're going to notice different mind states. That when there is a clench of aversion, the mind will go into some narrative around self-preservation. When there is some form of a pleasant or expansion, the mind will kind of move into desire and greed. And when you're in the in-between, the mind gets bored and the mind gets listless. So it's a fascinating way to begin to explore how to deconstruct your experience of reality. And you may find that if you are really fixated on something, In fact, this person who was finding themselves really fixating on being alone during the holidays and what that would be like, he began to recognize in his practice that here's this thought form of I'm alone. I'm alone. And then with that is a belief that kind of comes out. And his belief is this is going to be really, really hard. This is going to be a really, really hard and difficult time. That was the thought and belief that was getting reinforced again and again and again. Transcendent to that thought and belief perhaps was some form of emotion. And with that was kind of a sense of dread, a sense of fear, a sense of anxiety. Kind of transcendent to that was how that actually felt on the inside, how that thought, that belief, those emotions lived in his nervous system, and he could feel the clench. He could feel the anxiety. He could feel the tightness. He could feel the nervousness. And what he found was that by tending to the felt sense of that anxiety, by just seeing it, making room for it, bringing a little bit of empathy, a little bit of kindness to it, that something began to shift on the inside. And when he could sort of shift it energetically, well, it shifted his emotional experience. It shifted the thoughts about it. He began to kind of self-soothe and realize that he actually had a number of things that he could do that were going to make it okay. And this becomes part of the power and the gift of taking this view of the witness, self-observation without judgment. You can recognize when your mind is caught in obsessive thinking. You might even be able to recognize if there's a belief that's sort of generated out of those thoughts. Think the same thought 10,000 times, it hardens into a belief. But you can also sense, if you track that inwardly a little bit, what are the emotions? And of course, emotions are just experiences in the mind with sensations in the body. It's going to track you back to that felt sense, back to that quality of Vedana. And all of this begins to become more available to you the more that you can sense who you are as this witness or the observer, observing without judgment. And then you can begin to train your attention just to hang out on that level of Vedana or feeling tone. And then you can begin to see just how much that negativity bias impinges on your life. The clench, the self-protection, the desire and greed, the confusion. All of that becomes more and more available to you. It's challenging. I certainly don't do it all the time, but when I do, I notice that there's this constantly moving needle. I like this, I don't like this, I like this, I don't like this. So this practice of observing the feeling tone, of kind of this, I like this, I don't like this, is very, very powerful. But behind that is awareness. It's attention. It's this seat of self-observation without judgment. And it brings up a really interesting question. What does it mean to be aware of this process of witnessing or observing? And for me, for many, many years, I really thought that just being aware of the witness was the answer. If I can just be the witness and observe what's happening without judgment, that's the goal. Because when I'm the witness, I can begin to see my reactivity, and I can begin to recognize how my reactions are sort of hallucinations, and I can be a little bit more responsive. But is there more to it than that? And this becomes really, really interesting. Like, what does it mean to be aware of the witness itself? I was hiking with a good friend of mine. This was many, many years ago, way, way back in my ashram days. And we were out on a hike in the woods. And I remember we were talking about, well, what if we're just these biological probes on the planet, and we're reporting back information to some higher intelligence. That there's some higher intelligence through us that's just taking the information that we're just data collectors. was a really interesting kind of way to think about it. Like what is it that's perceiving through these portable flesh units that we're living in? And when you begin to kind of sense the witness, what is it that's cognizing? It can be quite interesting, I find. So I thought I might lead just a short little reflection here to kind of get a sense of this quality of the capacity to witness and the capacity to sense the witness. So if you like, you can close your eyes, and if you would, take 3 slow, deep breaths. Relax on the out breath. And you might take a moment just to sense if there's anything that could soften right now, anything that could relax. And you might, and again, this will be a pretty short meditation, but as you feel the breath, you might just sense if you can sort of bring all of your attention to that experience of the breath moving on the inside. And you might sense this quality of a kind of relaxed attention and relaxation and alertness at the same time. Now you might just take a few moments to let go of your breath and just take a moment. As I mentioned, one of the sense doors, just bring your attention there to kind of sense what's happening right there. Opening to sound vibration. Opening your attention to feeling externally the air against your skin, internally any sense of pressure, warmth, coolness. Opening awareness to smell. Opening awareness to taste. Opening awareness to the perception of light, of vision beyond your closed eyes. Opening your awareness to the brain, to the process of taking all this data and interpreting it. Opening your attention now to this quality of Vedana, of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, noting how it might fluctuate or change or maybe static. Opening your attention now to the narrative, to any stories that arise out of this. And just sensing now, what is it like for you to be aware of the witness itself? And you might again take 3 slow, deep breaths. And if you like, you can remain with your eyes closed, or if you like, you can let your eyes open, take a moment to stretch. When we really slow down and pay attention, there's a lot going on. The body is just doing its thing to kind of stay alive, breathing in, breathing out, sensations, bodily processes. All the senses are open all the time, taking in data. The brain is considered kind of a sixth sense because it's the brain that's taking all of this data and computing it and determining what's of value, what's a threat. And then we have the whole feeling tone of the body responding to the moment, either kind of leaning in and opening or closing down or that in-between place. And then there's the whole narrative going on. The mind just kind of making up stories about what's happening. And then from there, we have the habits that are built on the basis of thoughts and beliefs, and then the character that's developed out of your whole experience of what's happening here and now. This seat of the witness, it's almost like being this center of a cyclone, this still place surrounded by the swirling phenomena that's just never ending, or seemingly never ending. So the seat of the witness can be a place of a real refuge. It can be a very, very powerful place to be there. But of course, as soon as we're identified, we slip into some form of reactivity. So the question becomes, how do you stay on the seat of the observer? So it's helpful to remember kind of the foundations of the practice, that of course we're pulled into reactivity all the time. And this word sati in this form of meditation of anapanasati is the technique of being aware of breath. Anapana is breath, the experience of breath, all that arises from the breath. And sati is remembering. So remembering is a really key element here in this practice. Not just remembering the breath, but remembering the here and now, all that arises from the here and now, that all we're really seeking in life is found in the here and now. And so we have the practice of focus and concentration and arriving. That in order to take the seat of the witness, you've got to be here. So all the techniques that help you to arrive in the here and now are so helpful. And opening into mindfulness is from this place of intimate, present moment awareness. You then broaden your attention, and then you begin to sense, oh my God, here's everything that's happening. Is it possible to be aware of what's happening and to let things be at the same time? And of course, it's challenging. And so here you toggle back and forth from concentration, arriving, widening, opening into the seat of the witness. It's a delicate process because you're moving from willful practice into kind of gradations of more and more allowing. And this is the part I'd really like to play with the remaining time that we have here. Because so much of meditation practice is really seen as a practice of doing, and it is. When the mind is a caffeinated chipmunk, it needs to be trained. So there is an element of training the mind. And there's tremendous benefit in training the mind. Because as you train the mind to pay attention, very, very powerful things can happen. And I've always loved the analogy of training a puppy. You got a puppy, you say sit, puppy has no idea what you're talking about. You push her little bottom to the ground, quarter second, she's off and running. It's the same thing with our mind. Patience and persistence is what develops a healthy puppy. And I think it's the same thing for ourselves of recognizing this is the nature of the mind. The nature of the mind is to anticipate what's next. So come on back, let's re-arrive, let's begin again. And puppies learn how to sit. And the mind can learn how how to sit. You begin to recognize, well, when the puppy doesn't get exercise, the puppy's impossible to train. When the puppy's hungry, the puppy's not going to pay attention. Oh, what do you know? It's kind of the same thing for me too. When I'm well exercised and rested, it's kind of easier to be here and now. So a lot of self-awareness gets generated out of this. But there's an interesting thing here as you cultivate more and more of this sense of the witness. The little trap becomes that you become more and more aware of a kind of subject and object. Here you are as the witness, and then here are all the objects out there. So I had shared earlier this practice of noting or labeling. When a thought comes, you label it as thinking. When a sensation comes, label it as feeling. Or you can get a little more granular. When a certain kind of thought shows up, you can kind of label the type. Oh, anger. Oh, sadness. Oh, grief. Now there's something really, really powerful about that, because in a sense, you're disassociating from the thought, and in that creating a little bit more space between you and it. But it also has a very powerful way of reinforcing yourself as the witness, like this witness is some solid place inside. And I don't think that's true, because ultimately what we're pointing toward is something beyond the witness. We're pointing toward awareness itself. When the Buddha allegedly said that nothing whatsoever is to be clung to as I or mine, it refers to this very, very subtle place of the I that is aware of what's happening. Is it possible that too can dispel? And I think we've all had experiences of that, of kind of losing that sense of I and mine, and yet somewhere there's something present. We get glimpses. They're glimpse practices, moments of ecstasy, ecstasis, being out of the moment. Sometimes are more mystical experiences. Sometimes in sexual relationships, when you have le petit mort, the little death. Sometimes being absorbed into something. Sometimes being caught in kind of the mystery of nature, or in a deep, intimate moment. There's that sense of I and mine falling away, where the witness itself can fall away. This is tricky stuff, because you can't make it happen. That old thing of how enlightenment is an accident. Meditation makes you accident prone. There's a wonderful, wonderful little Zen thing that kind of speaks to this beautifully. The birds have vanished down the sky. Now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. There it is. What does that mean? When only the mountain remains, where is the self there? And yet there's awareness of the mountain, and yet there's no self. So I'd like to lead a little experience, which may or may not give you just a little bit of a taste of this sense of what it means to be aware of awareness itself, what it means to simply let the sense of self open into infinity. So before we do this, it's kind of helpful to get a little bit energized. So you might want to reach your arms up overhead and stretch up to the left side and the right side. This will be very, very gentle, but inhale. And then exhale, draw your arms down by your sides, the elbows down by your side, then reach up again. Inhale, exhale down. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. We'll do 3 more of these. Inhale. Keep breathing, don't hold the breath, but just feel the energy, let the energy build. If you like, close your eyes, let your hands float down by your side. As you're ready, slow down the breath. Let the breath be effortless. And as we move into this meditation, if you feel at all ungrounded, if it feels at all unsafe, you can open your eyes, you can shift the technique. But this will be just a few minutes, just 4 or 5 minutes. And you might now just feel the breath. Notice where you feel the breath on the inside. And can you just feel the space inside your body as you breathe? Feel the space inside the sinus cavities in your head. Can you feel the space in your trachea as you breathe? Can you feel the space inside your lungs as your body breathes? And can you imagine the perception of space as effortless? Can you imagine the space between your forehead and the back of your head? Can you imagine the space between your breastbone and your spine? Can you imagine the space between your navel and your spine? Can you imagine the space inside your body? And is it possible now to imagine the space in front of your body reaching beyond the furthest star? Can you imagine the space behind your body extending out beyond the furthest star? Can you imagine the space to the left of your body extending out beyond the furthest star? Can you imagine the space to the right of your body extending out beyond the furthest star? Can you imagine the space below your body extending out beyond the furthest star? Can you imagine the space above your body extending out beyond the furthest star? Can you imagine the space inside your body and the space outside your body as one vast continuous space? Can you imagine the perception of space as effortless? reflecting on these following words from Sri Nisargadatta. When I look beyond the mind, I see the witness. Beyond the witness, there is infinite intensity of emptiness and silence. And you might now very gently deepen the breath. And again, sense the space inside the body as you breathe. And you might, in your own time, just take a few moments to move and stretch in any way that feels good. Feel free to remain with the eyes closed, or you can let the eyes open as we just take a few minutes before we close. I hope you found that little practice helpful. I find that there's something about sensing the space extending out beyond the furthest stars, and the space inside my body as one continuous space that sometimes can kind of give me a glimpse of that sense of what it means to be simply surrendered into presence. When you sense what's beyond the witness, I find it really helpful to think of this as a glimpse practice. We cannot effort ourselves to sense infinite space, infinite awareness, infinite heart. And it's important to remember that it's not that recommended, particularly if you're driving. But we have these moments, and it's why it's so important to remember that there are these riverbanks that support your practice. That while it can be really, really exciting and exhilarating to open into the space beyond the witness, into awareness itself, that the foundation of what makes that possible is ethics. Every tradition has an emphasis on ethical behavior, and in Buddhism it's sila. The things to do and not do that are going to support you in your practice, the things that are going to distract you, the things that are going to help you stay focused. It's why concentration and arriving and gathering attention is so important in this practice, because when you open into that space beyond the witness, you can also quite often feel like you're ungrounded. So gathering attention is so powerful, to be in the here and now, to kind of organically broaden, widen your awareness, and explore this sense of who you are, awake without judgment. And here you may find yourself becoming free of your conditioning, free of your patterning, free of your traditional ways of self-protection, and becoming more skillful in life, becoming less reactive, more creative, more responsive. But it's also helpful to know that there's a mystery. There's something here beyond your capacity to observe. There's something beyond you as the subject and object practice. We can't force the river on sensing what lies beyond the witness of what it means to be aware of awareness itself. But I think it's very, very helpful to have this in the background. All great teachings, at least in the Buddhist tradition, point toward emptiness. When there's no self, when the witness has fallen away, here's how the third Zen patriarch describes it. Emptiness here, emptiness there, but the infinite universe stands always before your eyes, infinitely large and infinitely small. No difference, for definitions have vanished, and no boundaries are seen. So too with being and non-being. Don't waste time in doubts and arguments that have nothing to do with this. One thing, all things, move among and intermingle without distinction. To live in this realization is to be without anxiety about non-perfection. To live in this faith is the road to non-duality, because the non-dual is one with the trusting mind. When I unpack that, boy, there's a lot of juicy stuff in there. And one thing I find, because we have this desire to do it right, this desire, this self-judgment that inevitably informs our practice. And when the third Zen patriarch says, to live in this realization is to be without anxiety about non-perfection, it gives us this possibility of staying open and present to the mystery. And it's that state that gives me hope in my own practice. It was the third Zen patriarch who famously said that this path, that life, is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undisguised. Make the smallest distinction, however, and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart. It's such a subtle pointing out in practice. The slightest distinction between good and bad, and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart. And you experience that through Vedana, of sensing how the body moves into contraction or expansion, into greed or into aversion. The stories that arise out of that. The witness is the doorway to seeing that reactivity and opening into new possibilities. Thank you so much for your time and attention. May you and your witness, and may you and what lies beyond your witness, have a wonderful time. Thank you so much, and many, many blessings in your practice.